Hello, my dears, and welcome back to Granny's Guide. Come sit down by the fire. It's important you hear this story, because it's not about some fancy stock trade or a newfangled investment trick. It's about the very air you breathe in retirement, the value of your hard-earned dollar. The world is noisy right now, full of economists shouting about interest rates and politicians arguing about debt ceilings. But I don't listen to their noise. I listen to the rhythm of the grocery store, the sound of the gas pump, and the quiet sigh of a woman looking at her bank statement. The story I need to tell you today is about a dear friend of mine, Esther. It's the kind of quiet, creeping horror story that doesn't happen on Wall Street. It happens at the kitchen table, which, as I always say, is where the real economy lives. And it all started with a simple trip to the supermarket. Esther was 68, a widow for 3 years, and she thought her retirement was perfectly safe. She wasn't one for gambling. Her late husband, George, had been a rock of conservative finance. They had a tidy little house in South Carolina, their Social Security was solid, and in the bank they held what George called the fortress. $500,000 split between high-yield savings accounts and certificates of deposit, CDs. It was all dollar-denominated, insured by the FDIC, and meticulously tracked. The number on the bank statement was the number they focused on. Then came the spring of 2024. Esther was pushing her cart through the familiar aisles. She stopped at the canned goods, the little aisle she knew by heart, the one George always teased her about because she stocked up like a squirrel for winter. She reached for the canned peaches, the ones that reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen. She looked at the price tag. Last year they were $1.99. 2 years ago, $1.49. Today, $2.79. She didn't drop the can, but her heart dropped. It was just a can of peaches, but it was a needle point that pricked the bubble of her supposed security. If a $1.49 can of peaches can turn into a $2.79 can of peaches in 3 years, she thought, looking at her cart full of necessities, what does that mean for my $500,000? How many years of groceries do I actually have left? This, my dears, is the terror of currency debasement made personal. It's the silent tax the government doesn't mail you a bill for. It's what happens when the people in charge mistake printing money for creating wealth, believing their power is permanent, just like those old empires the history books tell us about. I knew Esther and George for nearly 50 years. They were the epitome of the silent generation's financial philosophy. Avoid debt, work hard, and put your money where it is guaranteed. George, bless his cautious soul, distrusted the share market the way a cat distrusts water. He'd seen the crashes of the 70s and 80s, and the tech bust in 2000. He saw stocks as speculative, something for the young and reckless. Esther, he'd tell her, tapping the bank statement with his finger. See that number? That number is insured. It will never go down. Everything we need in retirement is about capital preservation, not chasing some wild 20% return. His logic was sound based on the world he grew up in. Back then, money worked differently. In 1982, a 1-year CD might pay you 14%. Your money grew faster than inflation and debt, giving you real protection. The national debt, while a problem, wasn't a generational tidal wave. The country still manufactured and produced real things. George's entire financial strategy was built on the premise that the dollar itself was a stable, reliable store of value. He didn't realize he was building his retirement fortress on a slowly eroding sand dune. When George passed, Esther inherited the fortress. The $500,000 looked impressive on paper. She took $20,000 out a year to supplement their income, and the bank was paying her a paltry 0.5% interest on her savings and 1% on her CDs. The government, through the Federal Reserve, had kept interest rates near zero for years, trying to stimulate the economy. But for Esther, it was a slow-motion catastrophe. She was earning $5,000 a year in interest. She was taking $20,000 a year out. She was losing $15,000 a year in nominal terms. But the real problem was the quiet one: inflation. It wasn't just the peaches. It was the plumber who now charged $400 for a simple repair. It was the Medicare copays that jumped every year. It was the utility bill that seemed to defy the laws of physics, constantly climbing. Esther watched the national news, and they talked about the national debt in the trillions. An incomprehensible number. She heard the experts talk about how the government had printed trillions of new dollars to fight the pandemic and keep the economy afloat. That's when I heard from her. She called me late one Tuesday evening, her voice tight. "Granny," she started, the formality of her usual greeting gone. "I'm scared. I feel like I'm doing everything right, but every month I'm losing ground. I just got my new CD statement. They renewed it at 1.1%, but the TV says inflation is running at 5%. She took a shaky breath. That means every year I am guaranteed to be 4% poorer. I'm losing $20,000 a year in purchasing power, even if the number on the paper stays the same. George's fortress is sinking." I stopped her. "Oh, honey. You are absolutely right. You've stumbled onto the dark truth of our modern economy. You're not poor. You're just experiencing what I call the imperial economic hangover." I told her about the pattern the history books teach, the very same pattern the video you saw mentioned. Overextension and debt spiral. When an empire or a country spends more than it produces, it falls into a debt spiral. The United States national debt now exceeds the entire annual economic output. It's an impossible number to pay back through real taxes or real production. The easy way out: debasement. The only escape is to reduce the value of the debt. They can't physically remove zeros from the bills, so they do the next best thing. They print more currency. They flood the system with new dollars, making the old dollars, Esther's savings, worth less. "Think of it like this, dear," I explained. When the Spanish Empire in the 1600s had too much debt, they started mixing copper into their silver coins. The coin looked the same, but the metal, the real value, was gone. Today we don't use copper. We use the printing press. Your $500,000 is still $500,000, but they've diluted the silver in your coins. This is why safe investments like cash and low-interest CDs become the most dangerous places to keep your money during times of systemic financial strain. You get the illusion of stability while your real wealth is being siphoned away, not by a thief in the night, but by a government policy in the broad daylight. Esther was devastated. "But Granny, what am I supposed to do? George always said never to chase high returns." He said, "The stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. I don't want to be impatient, but I also don't want to run out of money." "That's a wonderful quote, and Warren Buffett said it for a reason," I affirmed. "The trouble is," George confused chasing returns with keeping up. "The market isn't just a casino, dear. It's a collection of productive capacity. It's the companies that make the peaches, process the gas, and fix the plumbing. They are the ones raising their prices, meaning they are the ones protecting their real value from the currency decay. You need to own a piece of the solution, not just hold on to the problem." The core decision for Esther was to move from being a creditor to the dollar, holding savings, to being an owner of productive assets, holding equity. I walked her through a difficult but essential plan, taking her money out of the sinking fortress, and putting it into a diversified ship designed to sail through inflation. Granny's prescription for retirement protection. 1. The income anchor, 40% of capital. The problem: Esther needed reliable income without risking her principal. High-risk stocks were out. The solution: a carefully chosen portfolio of dividend-paying blue-chip stocks and dividend growth ETFs. These companies have a track record of raising their payouts faster than inflation. The lesson weaved in: look for the companies that raise their prices every year without losing customers, Esther. The ones that sell toilet paper, medicine, and food. The things people buy no matter how crazy the economy gets. They are your new insurance. They are tied to the real cost of living. Your dividend grows, and your income fights the inflation tide. 2. The inflation hedge, 30% of capital. The problem: she needed assets that appreciate when the dollar is debased. The solution: real estate investment trusts, REITs, and commodity exposure via a broad ETF. The lesson weaved in: when the government prints more money, that money has to go somewhere. Chases scarce, tangible things. It chases land, it chases apartments, it chases gold. A variety that owns apartments in growing cities is an old-fashioned landlord. When your taxes and expenses go up, the landlord raises the rent. You, as the owner, collect the benefit. You're trading a paper promise for a piece of tangible, productive capacity. 3. The currency diversity, 30% of capital. The problem: the economic collapse video talked about the dollar eventually losing its reserve currency status. Esther's retirement shouldn't be 100% dependent on the US dollar. The solution: high-quality global/international ETFs, developed markets, and a small conservative allocation to physical gold. The lesson weaved in: never keep all your eggs in one basket, especially if that basket is the most indebted country in the world. Abigail Johnson, who runs Fidelity, has always stressed the importance of global diversification. When the dollar weakens, money flows into other currencies and markets. A bit of gold is not an investment for growth, dear. It is financial emergency room money. It's the ultimate currency insurance, because it is no one's debt and it cannot be printed. The decision was terrifying for Esther. It meant abandoning the lifelong certainty of George's methods. But the alternative, the certainty of losing purchasing power, was finally more frightening than the risk of the stock market. She made the decision to change slowly, deliberately, over 6 months, using a trusted advisor I recommended to implement the plan. It's been 2 years since Esther made that critical shift. She didn't get rich overnight, and she never expected to. But she achieved the only thing that truly matters in retirement: peace of mind through real security. Here's what happened to her fortress. The old fortress, the path not taken. If she had left the $500,000 in 1% CDs, she would have $510,000 today, before withdrawals. But with the 5% rolling inflation we've seen, that $510,000 would only buy what $459,000 bought 2 years ago. She would be losing the quiet ward, Esther's new ship. The productive path: her income from dividends and REITs now provides $22,000 a year, slightly more than her previous withdrawals, and crucially, that income is growing as the companies and landlords raise their prices/dividends. The value of her principal, the stocks and REITs, has appreciated, not because she got lucky, but because they are the real assets that money is fleeing to as the dollar melts. Her total portfolio is worth $545,000. She is not only not losing ground, but she is slightly ahead, and her income is self-adjusting against the inflation that threatens every fixed-income retiree. She called me a few months ago, this time laughing. "Granny, the funny thing is, the bank statement number still feels safe, but now I know it's a lie. The only thing that feels really safe is that my dividends went up by 6% this year. That is a fortress that inflation can't touch." The point of this story, my dear audience, is not to panic about the collapse of an empire. That is a politician's problem. Your problem is protecting your retirement from the symptoms of a collapsing economic system. The symptoms are debt and inflation. Esther's story is a simple lesson in common sense economics. We are at a point in history where the traditional rules of safety have been inverted. Your money needs to be a fighting force, not a casualty. Here are my 3 non-negotiable rules for protecting your retirement from the silent thief of currency debasement. 1. Nominal safety is a trap. Seek real safety. Nominal safety. A bank account or CD that guarantees you will get back the number of dollars you put in. In a world of high inflation, which is the consequence of high debt and currency printing, this guarantees you will get back fewer dollars in terms of purchasing power. This is the most dangerous investment of all. Real safety. Owning assets that naturally appreciate with the cost of living. This means owning things that make things or own things. Companies, stocks, land, REITs, and resources, commodities/gold, are the only assets that have stood the test of time against debasement. They are the productive capacity that the history books show are the last things to fail. 2. Diversification is your economic seatbelt. I learned this from my mother. Never bet your farm on a single season. The video talked about Spain, Britain, and the USSR. They all failed because they became dependent on one thing: Spanish silver, British sterling, Soviet oil. When that one pillar failed, the empire fell. You are not an empire, but your portfolio is your kingdom. Do not let your retirement depend solely on the economic health of the United States. Actionable tip. Allocate a portion of your wealth, I like 20 to 30% for those who are cautious, to high-quality international investments. When the US dollar finally weakens, and the math says it must, money flows out to foreign economies. You want your money to flow with it, not against it. 3. Income growth is your only defense. If your income is fixed, if it is based solely on a fixed pension payment or a bond with a 2% coupon, you have a target painted on your back. Inflation will find you and eat you alive. Actionable tip. Shift a portion of your fixed income portfolio into investments designed for income growth. This means high-quality dividend growth stocks or bonds whose interest rate is tied to the rate of inflation, like TIPS or Treasury inflation-protected securities. Your income must be a rubber band, not a rigid wire. It must stretch with the economic pressures. My dears, let the politicians worry about stage 5, 6, or 7 of the imperial collapse. You, the sensible women and men who have worked their fingers to the bone, must focus on the one thing you can control: protecting your own household economy. George was right about one thing: you must be patient. But patience doesn't mean standing still while the water rises. It means putting your money into the timeless, productive assets that reward the patient. The companies that will keep selling peaches for $2.79, and then $3 and then $3.50. Don't hold the dollar. Hold the companies the dollar has to buy. That is the wisdom of the ages. Go forth, be safe, and be productive. Don't leave that money on the table, darling. To secure your future before it's too late, click on one of these 2 essential stories. And if you found this advice useful, please like, share, and subscribe so we can help protect more good people. There's always more to learn.